discovered the incredible maid who said no to a millionaire CEO and transformed his life forever. Grace had never been one to bend. At 35, single and the sole provider for her teenage daughter Lily, she took pride in her work as a maid, a title that felt like both a badge and a burden. Each day, bags under her tired eyes belied the secret she kept, hidden behind the masks of competence and resilience. She swept the polished floors of corporate offices, her mop gliding across floors that reflected the bright lights of success, while she wrestled with the wondering if the choices she made defined her existence or merely kept her afloat. As she picked up the crumbs left by corporate gladiators, her heart ached not for their wealth, but for the integrity that somehow seeped from her soul into the floors she cleaned. Pushing her cart through the heavy glass doors of Derek Caldwell's executive suite, she caught him on a particularly tense day. The CEO paced, tension radiating from him like heat waves. It was no secret that his empire faced scrutiny. Whispers about corruption bubbled beneath the surface. As they crossed paths, Grace felt a knot tighten in her stomach. No amount of wealth could cure the desperation in a man who'd forgotten the value of simple, honest living. But then, as Grace mopped, she overheard him. "We have to find a way to shift the narrative." Her breath hitched. The words dripped with a calculated ambition that unsettled her. To use deceit as a means to obliterate public concern, it made her insides twist. She had struggled through life teaching Lily that integrity reigns supreme, yet here was a man bound by corporate chains that choked the essence of truth. As Grace's resolve hardened, panic clawed at her mind. What should she do? Confront him openly, or keep her head down, desperately trying to protect her daughter while risking a moral compromise? The escalation of fear tangled with frustration within her. It threatened her values like a storm brewing just beyond the treetops. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the days slipped by, Grace wrestled with her conscience, flaying herself alive with doubt. Should she be the one to tip the scales of justice, knowing what was at stake for her graceful yet fragile existence? And yet, within all that turmoil, a fire ignited, a sense of purpose so fierce that it swallowed her fear whole. What would be the price of her stand? Her mind raced, heart thudding heavy. Could she truly say no to a man who'd built his name on the very property she cleaned? And in doing so, would she lose everything she had fought for? The seconds ticked like hammers pounding at her resolve. Grace stood on a precipice, contemplating the embrace of consequential authenticity or spinning into the treacherous webs of deceit. In this election of the soul, everything felt raw. The lines between right and survival blurred into chaos. The walls of Derek's empire weren't just made of gold and glass, but of the very moral code she held so dearly. As shadows loomed, Grace drew a deep breath, the tension thickening, a moment ready to explode, leaving both their fates hanging in the balance. Would she dare break through the barrier of silence that loomed between them? Or would the fear of losing her life's work shackle her voice? Grace stood motionless in the middle of the executive suite, her cart nearby like a sentinel of her reality. The vacuum of silence was both suffocating and exhilarating, urging her to fill the space with words, her words. The complexities of personal stakes wrestled within her. This could easily become a reckless impulsivity or a well-aimed arrow aimed straight at the heart of deceit. With her heart racing, she felt the weight of the decision stretching out towards her, like a road diverging into uncharted territory. She had never pictured herself as the sort of person who would challenge authority, much less a powerful CEO like Derek Caldwell. Yet here she was, an unlikely warrior standing at a moral crossroads that demanded her truth. The thought flickered through her mind, an ember igniting into a flame. Could this moment of confrontation blossom into something transformative, not just for her but for him too? Taking a deep breath, she strode forward, each step increasing her resolve. "Mr. Caldwell." Her voice cut through the thick atmosphere, wrapping around the tension that seemed to cling to the walls. Derek stopped pacing, his expression a snapshot of surprise. She had his attention. Now it was time to fortify the foundation beneath her words. "Your company is facing scrutiny for a good reason," she continued, her voice steady despite the quaking nerves beneath her composed exterior. "You have a chance to change the narrative, but not in the way you think." He narrowed his gaze, curiosity piqued yet defensive. "And what would you know about it?" His tone was condescending, but something deeper lay beneath, perhaps a flicker of doubt or desperation. "More than you might realize," she replied, refusing to back down. "I clean these floors, but I see how things function. Your reputation is built on more than just profits. It's about trust and integrity." The weight of her words pierced through the polished veneer of his world, and she watched as the powerful facade around him threatened to slip. For a moment, she could almost sense unexpected intrusion. Derek's expression shifted from contemplation to alarm, and she sensed that this was a pivotal point, not only for him, but also for her. She gathered her thoughts, ready to face whatever storm had just entered the room. The men in suits exuded authority, but there was an underlying current of desperation radiating from them, as if they were not only worried about their boss, but also about their own credibility. "Mr. Caldwell," one of the men began, glancing toward Grace with a hint of confusion, "we need to discuss the upcoming board meeting. Your presence is required immediately." His voice crackled with urgency, emphasizing the gravity of their circumstances. Derek exchanged a fleeting look with Grace, and in that instance, she saw a plethora of emotions flicker across his face: fear, frustration, but also a glimmer of hope. He looked as if he were grappling with a choice. She wondered if her words had pierced through his hardened exterior, fastened themselves to a part of him yearning for authenticity. While the men prepared to usher Derek out, Grace took a step forward. "Wait," she interjected, her voice steady, clearer than before. "What happens next will determine the integrity of not just you, but this entire organization. Do you intend to perpetuate lies because it's easier?" All eyes turned to her, but it was Derek's gaze that held the most power. He didn't recoil. Instead, it seemed he needed someone to challenge him. The men shuffled uncomfortably, unease rippling through the atmosphere. "Grace," Derek said, his voice low yet commanding, "these are my executives. I can't allow." She held her breath, feeling the tension radiate from him like a heat wave. "You can't allow yourself to be a prisoner of fear. It's time to stand for what is right." Each word turned into a deliberate decision, an act of rebellion against complacency. The silence morphed as Derek wrestled with the implications of Grace's boldness. The men exchanged wary glances, their confusion now tinged with astonishment. She realized that in this moment, she wasn't just speaking for herself or Derek, she was echoing a truth that reverberated through the very walls of the corporate structure. One of the executives, the apparent leader, finally broke the tension. "Mr. Caldwell, this is not the time for emotion. We need to navigate these waters carefully. We have protocols." "No," Derek interrupted, his voice stronger now, emboldened by Grace's words. "If I am going to rebuild this company, then I need to start from honesty. We cannot hide behind protocols when integrity is at stake." Grace felt a rush of exhilaration. Her heart raced as she clung to the belief that this could be a turning point. She had discovered a power within herself, a voice reverberating with authenticity. The door stood ajar now, revealing not just the chaos of the outer office, but an invitation to step into a new realm of possibilities. This was her moment too, not just as a janitor, but as a catalyst for change. She envisioned a world where integrity triumphed over greed, driven by shared courage to confront uncomfortable truths. "Then let's do this," Derek said, resolutely, abandoning the safety net of his previous atmosphere. Together. They turned towards the door as a united front, and Grace knew that this was just the beginning. She had discovered a depth in herself she never knew existed, and now she stood ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. But as they stepped into the bustling world outside the executive suite, a world fraught with judgment and peril, an ominous question surfaced in the back of Grace's mind. Would they be able to withstand the scrutiny that awaited? Or would their newfound resolve break under the weight of external pressures? With the luminescence of determination guiding her, Grace took a step forward. The time had come to face not only the scrutiny of the boardroom, but her own destiny. Grace stepped into the chaotic outer office, her heart pounding in rhythm with the bustling energy around her. The fluorescent lights above flickered, reflecting her mixed emotions of exhilaration and trepidation. This was more than a moment. It marked the crucible of her metamorphosis. No longer just an observer in the corporate world, she was now ignited by an unwavering resolve that coursed through her veins like a newfound fire. Derek stood beside her, visibly shaken yet emboldened, the strength of their shared commitment emboldening them both. The executive team had resumed their discussion, but this time it felt different, a subtle shift where tension mingled with burgeoning hope. However, the constant undercurrent of judgment loomed. The gravity of their decisions would reverberate beyond these walls. "Look, everyone needs to understand," Derek began, his voice steady but not without strain. "We're in a crisis of trust. If we don't address this head-on, who are we as a company? Who am I as a leader?" He was fumbling through his thoughts, but Grace saw the sparks of conviction igniting in him, each word a step toward reclaiming his integrity. Grace crossed her arms, grounding herself in the moment. She could feel the weight of their peers' eyes, puzzled, skeptical, and hovering. This scrutiny was not just an external force, but it summoned her internal fears. What if she was just a janitor again? What if her voice was silenced? "Derek," she said, her tone soft yet resolute, "you must be the one to lead this. Whatever happens next, it has to come from you, not just from fear of losing your position or confronting challenges. Your strength needs to shine through. My contribution doesn't diminish your value, it enhances it." He paused, eyes narrowing, as if weighing the sincerity of her support against the legacy he had embraced for so long. A flicker of acknowledgement passed between them, cutting through the tension. That look was everything: validation, potential, and the recognition of both their roles in this emerging narrative. When Derek spoke again, it was with a different tone, one that, "We'll implement a transparent approach in our next meeting. I won't hide from the board's questions. And Grace, would you be willing to voice your insights? I want them to hear your perspective." A bolt of shock coursed through her. Was he really going to allow her seat at the table? A janitor speaking in a board meeting? Yet there was a feeling of inevitability nestled in this confrontation. Even if it felt strange, perhaps it was time to embrace the unexpected. "Of course," she said, resisting the urge to question her worth. "I'll prepare something that reflects the reality we need to face." A wave of determination surged as they began to concoct their strategy. It was time to challenge tradition and reshape their identities. Grace, the janitor with a voice, and Derek, the CEO, reclaiming his integrity. Chaos still swirled around them, but their immediate actions began to feel clearer. Grace mapped out her thoughts, drawing inspiration from the radiant warmth growing within her. She believed in a fight for authenticity, and she felt grounded in the truth of their united front. Just as they turned to face the barrage of questions awaiting them, Grace found herself grappling with an unsettling emotion. Would her voice be listened to, or would she merely be seen as an interloper in this upper-crust world? The dawning realization struck her. This was the moment to confront her insecurities head-on. She was not just claiming space, she was claiming a narrative. As they took their places among the other executives, Grace steeled herself for the inevitable scrutiny. Would she stand tall in her truth, or would she falter in the face of fear? This defining moment beckoned her. Just as she was about to speak her truth, the door swung open, and in stepped Julian, a fierce corporate rival, with a knowing smirk spreading across his face. Grace's heart raced, the atmosphere shifted instantly, and she felt the weight of the impending confrontation settle heavily on her shoulders. Would Julian view her as a threat or a mere janitor? The stakes were now higher than ever, and the direction of her journey hung precariously at that threshold. The tension in the room became palpable the moment Julian stepped inside, his presence a disruption that sent ripples through the tightly knit assembly. Grace felt her stomach twist as eyes darted to him, eager for the game to unfold. Julian's reputation preceded him. He was cunning and relentless, a master at playing corporate politics. The smirk on his face was a proclamation of war. "You're gonna wanna hear this, trust me," Julian said, his tone slick and confident, looking between Derek and Grace. His charm had an intoxicating quality, capable of dulling the sharpest defenses. Here was a man who thrived in the shadows of doubt, who often twisted narratives to his favor. Grace's heart raced, but she grounded herself in the gravity of the moment. This was no longer just about her. It was about integrity, transparency, and the potential to redefine the narrative that Julian had thrived upon. Her hands clenched at her sides. The impulse to retreat was tempting, but the burgeoning fire within whispered for her to confront him. "Actually, Julian, you've been the master of concealment, and that's precisely what has brought us to this threshold," Grace replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The words surged forth like a ripple, surprising even herself at the boldness. Perhaps it was the supportive glance from Derek, or the mounting courage born from the weight of upcoming decisions. Julian raised an eyebrow, momentarily caught off guard. He didn't take kindly to being challenged openly, especially not by someone he had viewed as below his professional station. "Oh, really? And what exactly do you think you'll contribute to this conversation?" A contemplative silence filled the air, punctuated by a shared look with Derek, who had a small, imperceptible nod of encouragement. Grace's determination solidified. This was the moment to shift perceptions. "I may have been a janitor, but I've seen the underbelly of this organization. I know the repercussions of choices made in the dark, and I'm willing to speak the truth if you're ready to listen." Her words hung in the air, imbued with defiance and a burgeoning self-assurance. Derek's expression shifted from uncertainty to fierce pride. And in that brief moment, she felt not just his support, but the weight of collective expectation return to her. This wasn't just her battle, it was theirs. Julian's smirk faltered, briefly revealing the cracks in his calm facade. "You think the board will take anything you say seriously? Please." Grace felt a shiver of doubt, an echo of her past where she often succumbed to the whims of others' ridicule. But this time, doubt birthed clarity. "Maybe not all of them, but if I speak with authenticity, I'll at least be true to myself. It's time to stop pretending that the status quo is doing anyone any favors." Derek interjected, regaining control as he stepped forward, now fueled by Grace's resolve. "We're breaking down the barriers of what has been the norm. If you or anyone else thinks we'll go back to hiding, they should reconsider. Frankly, we're more than past due for a reckoning." His voice echoed with newfound determination, a stark contrast to the uncertainty that had plagued him before. As the executives absorbed Derek's statement and the charged atmosphere hung heavy with potential, Grace's mind raced. This confrontation wasn't just an obstacle. It was a defining moment that could channel their frustrations into a new narrative. Eyes turned to her again. Silencing the doubts, she spoke firmly. We can lead this company back into a place of trust, but it requires transparency. It requires facing the truth head on, not just for our team, but for everyone who believes in what we can achieve. I'm willing to contribute my insights on that." Yet Julian, flustered but not defeated, lunged back. "And? What makes you think your insights will matter? Why should anyone listen to a glorified maid?" Grace felt the weight of his words, a bitter sting that tried to pull her back down. But the vision of her journey, the courage it took to arrive at this moment, ignited a surge of defiance within her. Because if I can rise from cleaning floors to standing here today, then so can anyone in this room. And maybe it's time we recognize that every voice, including mine, holds value. As the tension thickened, Grace stood rooted, challenging the very foundations of where she once wrestled with self-doubt. A growing urgency filled her senses, and as Julian regarded her, his eyes narrowing with newfound respect or perhaps anger, she realized how far she had come. But would that journey push her even further than she anticipated? Would Julian respond with ferocity, or could this be a moment of shifting tides? The uncertainty lingered as the others held their breaths, waiting to see how this confrontation might evolve. Would Grace's voice resonate in the chamber of decision-making, or would Julian's machinations drown her out? Grace sensed the stakes escalating, and as she prepared mentally for what lay ahead, another thought struck her. What if she had yet to truly uncover her own potential? What else did she need to face about herself to fully embrace her evolving role? The door had opened to an unexpected narrative, but the path forward remained cloaked in uncertainty. What awaited her on this next step of her journey? Grace's heart drummed in her chest, a rhythm of urgency and purpose as Julian's gaze locked onto hers. Gone was the timid specter that once inhabited these corporate walls. She sensed a switch within herself, from passive observer to active participant in her own narrative. "Are you done with your theatrics?" Julian scoffed, his bravado an unsettling mask that could slip at any moment. The room's stillness held its breath, awaiting her reply. The line between fear and resolve began to blur, and Grace swallowed hard, willing her voice to remain steady. "No, Julian, this is not theatrics. It's time to face the reality you've supported." Each word she spoke felt like a stepping stone on an unsteady path, yet armed with newfound conviction, she pressed on. Derek, fueled by her bravery, added, "We need a shift in leadership. The people deserve authenticity, and it's time we stop choosing convenience over truth." His assertion rippled through the assembly, awakening a sense of connection behind the felt barrier created by Julian. Grace took a deep breath, grateful for his incredible support, yet feeling the pressure of the moment swell. "We can't skirt around the issues any longer. I may have started at the bottom, but I've learned more than what you see on the surface. Perhaps it's time for everyone here to reconsider what they think they know about me." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Julian's face. "And pray tell, how do you envision this transformation?" Grace's mind raced with an array of strategies. "We can conduct transparent evaluations of our internal processes, implement open feedback from employees regardless of their position, and facilitate training sessions where everyone can voice their concerns without fear of retaliation." Each idea carried the weight of her experience, a blueprint derived from both struggle and tenacity. Julian leaned back, his arms crossed, calculating. "And what makes you think I won't just dismantle that framework before it even has a chance to breathe?" The challenge was palpable, and within her chest, a fierce resolve ignited. "Because the truth will resonate louder than your manipulation. You underestimate the power of solidarity among the people in this room." She paused, allowing that consideration to land. Perhaps it would only take a small shift, an errant doubt within Julian's confidence, to undermine his carefully crafted facade. "You may have clout, but your power relies on misinformation. We're all learning to see through it." Despite herself, Grace felt her confidence swell. The room began to pulse with an energy she rarely experienced. She sensed acceptance, as if her vulnerability had cracked the veneer of professionalism and revealed earnest humanity, which Julian could not deny. Yet he appeared unyielding, his expression shifting to something close to indignant rage. "You're playing a dangerous game, Grace. You think you can turn the tide with hollow slogans?" She searched his eyes, realizing he sensed the threat she posed. "No slogans, just the ability to share our realities. We are not just cogs in your machine. We are the engine that drives this company." The silence that followed felt electric, every set of eyes waiting, hoping, daring him to respond. It was one thing to challenge Julian, it was another to challenge an entire system that had persisted for years. "Perhaps an unexpected windfall was exactly what this company needs," she remarked, words tumbling out in a surge of passion. "I know the fear of inadequacy well, but we can rise together, exemplifying how diverse perspectives can culminate in true innovation." A small, barely perceptible shift occurred in the room. Some executives leaned forward, caught up in her fervor. Julian, visibly unsteady, seemed to realize they were not just witnesses to a confrontation, but participants in a movement. He opened his mouth, yet words escaped him, allowing a profound silence to swell. Beneath the calm surface, an undercurrent of trepidation rippled through Grace. Was she courageous or recklessly provoking a corporate titan? As his silence lingered, a path emerged, one riddled with uncertainty, yet glowing with the promise of change. One thing echoed resolutely in her mind. The time had come to confront not just Julian, but also the voice she had long suppressed within herself. Fueled by her revelations, Grace recalled the challenges yet to come. Her thoughts ricocheted between hope and anxiety about what Julian's next move would be, feeling the stakes rise exponentially. What would be required of her once the board recognized the strength of their collective? Across the corporate landscape of ambition and ambition thwarted, the power dynamic shifted. It was becoming clear that the true battle was not solely hers against Julian. It was about awakening a shared strength entwined within each member of the team, challenging the very foundation of their corporate identity. An unsettling thought loomed over her. What if she was not only battling Julian, but also her past insecurities, which had long dictated her sense of self-worth? That realization could either empower her further or become a specter of doubt shadowing her every decision. Grace found herself at an uncertain crossroad, preparing for a decision point that could forever alter her trajectory and the fate of those surrounding her. Would courage continue to illuminate her path, or would Julian's ruthless tactics reassert control over the narrative? The moment for clarity was upon her, yet somehow further out of reach than ever before. The next heartbeat echoed in the silence, a mounting tension that swelled with each passing moment. Grace could feel the weight of the room's collective gaze anchoring her to the floor, an electric current of anticipation mingling with her own unvoiced fears. Julian's silence was both an opportunity and a threat, a moment that might lead to resolution or fracture, depending on how she navigated it. She couldn't allow this moment to slip into oblivion. As disciplines clashed in her mind, she steadied herself, mentally reminding herself of her intentions. "I believe in progress," she stated firmly, forcing clarity into the chaos. "But it has to start here, with all of us. This can't merely be about you adapting to our desires to placate us." The clarity of her own thoughts began to dispel the fog of uncertainty enveloping her. Each word she spoke resonated with her own evolving identity, the realization that her voice mattered more than the criticisms she'd so often internalized. It was time to elevate the conversation beyond Julian's arrogance. "You've built these walls that kept us at bay," she pressed, her voice steadying, "but I want to break them down. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's a catalyst for resilience. All of us here have our own stories, struggles that bind us more than your top-down authority ever could." Julian's face darkened, but she noted an almost imperceptible shift in his demeanor, perhaps a begrudging respect for her determination. The air seemed to thicken with possibility. She recalled the countless conversations overheard in the break room, snippets of frustration regarding bottlenecks and breakdowns of trust that no longer felt insurmountable. When she pivoted to address the assembly directly, a tentative yet collective enthusiasm filled her chest. What can we accomplish when we embrace transparency, when we use our diverse experiences to shed light on operational shortcomings that hoard innovation? A murmur swept through the room. Executives who had been bound by Julian's shadow nodded, their eyes alight with a burgeoning hope. It was enough to kindle encouragement within Grace, but she was conscious that enthusiasm must be carefully stored, lest it be extinguished by skepticism. Let's create a space for collaboration where everyone feels they can contribute, Grace continued, framing her vision as a bridge to unity. Reward honesty and explore the potential of our collective insights. This isn't a project, this is a path forward. Julian scoffed, reasserting his air of defiance. And what makes you think the board will listen? They thrive on dependency, Grace. You may inspire this group, but they aren't the ones calling the shots. For a fleeting moment, doubts crept back. But as she felt the growing camaraderie in the atmosphere, she resolved not to back down. So, let's momentarily step outside the boardroom politics that you thrive on. We can bring this to them, empower our peers to present their truths. Julian's expression hardened once more, and Grace understood. He was cornered, wary of losing the tight grip he held. Yet within herself, she felt a liberating spark. The very act of challenging him was catalyzing an irresistible momentum. The clock was ticking, and each second felt like fate's insistence. What will you choose, Julian? She challenged, intensifying the stakes of the moment. Will you adapt, or will you cling to a crumbling foundation? We have a choice to shed the past and build something true. His silence hung heavy, thick enough to cut. If he were to dismiss her, it would signal not just a battle of wills, but the potential collapse of trust across the organizational landscape. She sensed the shift in the room and felt herself growing, not only as a leader, but as a confidant in their struggles, their aspirations, their stories. Yet Julian's tenure was not to be dismantled without a fight. The question loomed as the moment stretched taut. How far was she willing to go to uphold the authenticity she claimed to champion? With every heartbeat echoing threats of retribution or rejection, she realized that confronting Julian was merely the beginning of a much deeper journey, one that would ultimately necessitate a reckoning with her own inner apprehensions. Would the strength of her resolve hold against his inevitable retaliation? As gravitational forces in the room shifted, she felt trapped between possibility and peril, and the crossroads of her identity loomed closer than ever. What unseen layers of her own psyche would she need to unearth in this unfolding battle? A knot tightened in her chest as she braced for Julian's next move, knowing that soon she would face not just him, but the very essence of who she could become. The palpable silence broke as Julian's lips pressed into a thin line, his internal struggle playing out behind his calculating eyes. Grace stood on the precipice of uncertainty, but beneath the shroud of tension, the heart of her conviction thumped loudly. She could feel the collective uncertainty of her peers, the weight of their expectations blending with her own determination. The challenge wasn't only with Julian, it was the labyrinth of perceptions and consequences that she now had to navigate. "It seems we've reached an impasse," he finally replied, enunciating each syllable with a disdain that cut through the air. "But this isn't a fair fight, Grace. I don't lose, and you'll soon see how costly this endeavor will be." His threat resonated deeply, a stark reminder of the reality in which she was operating. But alongside the fear was an ember of courage growing within her, fueled by the faces surrounding her, her colleagues, her erstwhile allies drawn out of the shadows. Grace squeezed her hands into fists, amplifying her resolve. "This isn't about winning or losing," she countered, urgency creeping into her tone. It's about progress for all of us. Is that not worthy? You may control the board, but you cannot control the future." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group, and the energy shifted. She could see the glimmer of possibility in their eyes, fear slowly transforming into a commitment to change. But that transformation could vanish if she faltered. "You think you can rally support against me?" he shot back, trying to pierce her armor. "This isn't a movement, it's a rebellion, and history favors the powerful." He was laying out the stakes, and she felt their weight. Her imagination raced forward, grappling with the fear of fallout, of losing not just a position, but the career she fought for. For a fleeting moment, doubt crept in. Was it worth risking everything she had built? "What if we don't need a rebellion, Julian?" she questioned softly, controlling the outward tremor in her voice. "What if all we need is to listen, really listen to one another?" Grace sensed a flicker of vulnerability in his steel gaze, but it was fleeting, replaced once more by arrogance. "Please, cooperation never changed a thing. You'd be wise to remember that." But her heart surged in defiance. Grace was aware of a personal truth emerging through the chaos, a determination not only to seek change, but to embody it. The act of raising her voice stemmed from a newfound realization of her own capability to inspire, to lead beyond the constraints that Julian had set. An unexpected clarity settled over her. "I refuse to play the role you've constructed for me," she asserted firmly, her posture solidifying as she spoke. "This isn't just on you, it's on all of us to redefine what this organization represents. If that scares you, then maybe it's time for a change at the top." As she spoke, her vision expanded with every powerful phrase, her fear mutating into a conviction that gripped her soul. Around her, the nervous energy transformed into a steady hum of influence, others echoing her sentiments, localizing into one compelling pursuit of truth. This wasn't merely a manifestation of courage, this was a liberation of latent voices united against the suppression once woven into the fabric of their work life. Yet, amidst the strengthening tide, she felt an ominous pressure radiating from Julian, a storm brewing beneath his flickering bravado. With each passing moment, a confrontation loomed larger, not just with him, but with the fragility of her self-assurance on this journey. As she prepared to pivot her approach again, a chilling resolve filled her. This path would not come without its trials. The sense of what lay ahead electrified her, challenging her to step into an unknown devoid of guarantees. "Julian," she began anew, the air dense with anticipation. "The time has come to face not just our fears, but also who we truly want to be as a collective. Will you meet us here, or will you continue underestimating the power of what we could become?" The silence that followed was an invitation and an ultimatum. How far was she willing to go to prove her strength and claim her voice? Grace's heart raced, the battle lines drawn not just between her and Julian, but inside herself. This was the cusp of change. She could feel it thrumming in her veins. And as she awaited his response, she realized she was standing on the brink of not just a professional confrontation, but a profound personal evolution. What pivotal choices would she have to make to cement her newfound power? And what consequences awaited them all if she did? The air in the room crackled with a tension so thick it felt almost tangible. Grace's heart pounded against her ribcage as she watched Julian's expression shift, furious calculation flaring in his eyes. Her pulse surged, the blood rushing in her ears, a steady reminder that this moment was significant, not just for her, but for everyone encased in this power struggle. Still, the fervor of her convictions bridged the gap between fear and elation. She was carving a path toward an unknown but exhilarating territory, one defined by her values rather than manipulated by his machinations. How did this transformation occur? She could hardly recognize the woman in the mirror each morning, emboldened and unwavering, each day becoming something she never thought she could be. "Do you think your inspired speeches can sway me?" Julian's voice lashed out, sharp as a whip. You don't know what kind of resources I have at my disposal. I will crush this insurrection before it even begins." His confidence reflected years of dominance, yet a flicker of panic simmered beneath his bravado. Grace recognized this as her opportunity. This was no longer just about Julian's authority, but about redefining her existence in this realm. The mere act of standing up had galvanized her spirit, illuminating her innate potential. "How many people have you crushed, Julian?" she challenged, her tone steady despite the internal storm. "Because the more you crush, the weaker you appear. Maybe the obligation isn't to conquer, but to cultivate genuine voices, even yours." Startled, she saw a small shift in his demeanor, a moment of uncertainty she had hoped to elicit. But before she could lean into that fragile moment of vulnerability, he retreated behind a facade of disdain. "You believe you're a lion among sheep, but you're mistaken. You're merely another cow in the herd." Determined to paint an alternate reality, Grace adjusted her strategy. "I'm not asking you to concede, but to reconsider. What legacy do you want to leave behind? A dictator's grip or a visionary's legacy? The choice is frequent in the realm of influence you hold." Every word was like a stone tossed into a pond, her intention rippling through the group as they shifted, caught in the tension of their dual loyalties. Julian's intimidating history and Grace's emerging resolve. Were they ready to follow her lead? The answer rested precariously upon the reaction of a single man. As the room held its breath, Grace realized she had never consciously articulated her worth before. Perhaps that's what empowerment truly was, recognizing and proclaiming her right to exist authentically in a landscape filled with shadows. She felt empowered by this realization, the scope of her voice expanding in ways she hadn't anticipated. "You can't control everything, Julian," she pressed on, with the fire ignited by her own conviction. "Your power relies on fear, but fear only stifles innovation. We can achieve more together than you could ever bully us into doing apart." Julian's eyes darkened, his jaw clenching, as if he were swallowing his own pride. In that moment, she saw it, the cracks forming in his fortress, the possibility of change. But it was only the beginning of a much larger conflict, and she understood the stakes were steep. With the unsettling silence stretching between them, Grace contemplated the consequences of her bold stance. Each word was a commitment to herself, a necessary step in a journey she desperately wanted to succeed in. What if her attempt at empowerment led to backlash? What if Julian had the last word, the final say in her career trajectory? The choices weighed heavily on her as the circled tension remained unresolved, and she was acutely aware that her professional identity was threatening to fracture. Was she ready to risk everything, a life she had meticulously built, for a name on a piece of paper that defined her career trajectory? But what haunted her most was not Julian's response, but her own capacity to endure whatever came next. As she stood there, heart racing, she acknowledged the pivotal truth. This wasn't merely about defeating an adversary. It was about discovering who she was beyond the scraps of power they both vied for. For every moment spent battling Julian's influence, there lay an opportunity for self-discovery, an unveiling of her authentic self. It was a price worth paying, even if it meant standing against the fury of a man whose ambition bordered on tyranny. Would Julian rise to the challenge of reform, or would he fall victim to the very fear he wielded? As she awaited his next move, the answer held the potential to alter everything, not just for herself, but for a future yet unimagined. In that moment of collective uncertainty, a dawning, the next move was as much hers as it was his. What would happen when the inevitable tension broke? Would it lead to liberation or a deeper entrenchment of the status quo? Grace inhaled steadily, understanding that the real confrontation was merely beginning. The tension in the room reached a crescendo, each heartbeat loud as a drum. Grace stood at the precipice of a defining moment, her resolve a fierce fire against Julian's oppressive shadow. With every passing second, she could feel the collective weight of her colleagues' expectations breathing life into her courage. They were no longer passive spectators. They were witnesses to a revolution brewing within her heart. "Julian," she said, her voice unwavering, "I may not have your resources or your title, but I hold something more valuable: integrity and courage. When people rise above fear to speak their truths, a tapestry of genuine voices emerges, and that power cannot be silenced." His sneer faltered, and for a moment she perceived a flicker of uncertainty within the walls he had built around himself. "You think you can inspire change?" he scoffed, disbelief lacing his words. "The board is ruled by dollars, not ideals." "That's where you're wrong," she replied, feeling the swell of support behind her. "People have loyalty to principles, and the winds of change are swift. Your empire is built on deceit. It will crumble if you don't reform. In today's world, transparency trumps travesty." Julian's eyes glimmered with an unnerving mix of anger and contemplation. Grace felt the moment vibrate with potential, her vulnerabilities transforming into an armor of strength. She had finally embraced her worth beyond just her job title. She realized she was a custodian of truth in a world clouded by neglect. "Maybe it's time you face the truth too," Grace continued, a charge echoing her resolve. "I expect you to stand with us, not against us. Our voices can rectify the disruption lingering in this company, if only you choose to lend your strength." Derek stood beside her, inspired by her defiance. "There's no saving this company without moving beyond the manipulation of past structures," he declared, confidence battling against the undercurrent of tension. "Grace's voice matters, and our voices matter. Fear can no longer dictate our narrative." The executives around the table began to lean in, sensing the shift, as if their loyalties were peeling away from Julian's grip. Grace felt hope blossom within her. They were not alone in this fight. But Julian held his ground, resistance wrapping around him like an iron shroud. "You think I'll hand over my reign because of a few heartfelt speeches?" His tone was venomous, but the tremor beneath his bravado was undeniable. "This is business, Grace. Do you understand that?" "I understand that business thrives on trust," she replied, the full weight of her conviction awakening a strength she didn't know resided within her. "And trust is something you have squandered. We are at a waiting point, change or repetition. It's your choice." The silence hung thick like smoke, but this time she no longer felt smothered by it. Grace glanced around, observing the expressions of her colleagues shifting from fear to quiet support. This wasn't just her uphill battle. It was a collaborative call to create a new future, one built on transparency, inclusiveness, and respect for every individual connected to the company. "Join us," she urged again, "or be consumed by your own empire's destruction. We could be part of something monumental, a rebirth where we elevate this corporation through authenticity." In that moment, Julian's facade began to crack. She caught a glimpse of the turmoil roiling beneath the surface, a man struggling to balance selfish ambition with the fear of losing everything he clung to. Would he choose self-preservation or the genuine growth they all needed, both as individuals and a company? "Perhaps I've underestimated the weight of your words," he said finally, his voice quieter, as if he were realizing the stakes for the first time. "But I won't simply dissolve my authority." "I don't ask you to do that," Grace responded earnestly, "but I ask you to use it for the greater good. Together, we can navigate this. Your strength could guide us through the shadows, into the light where integrity reigns." The room fell mute, the gravity of the challenge resting heavily on Julian's shoulders. Grace felt the support echoing around her, a unified front aspiring toward change. "Very well," he conceded at last, a hint of vulnerability flickering behind his hardened gaze. "I'll listen, but you'd better know what you're asking for, because this won't be easy." A palpable sigh of relief rippled through the gathering as hope ignited. Grace's heart soared, a whirlwind of triumph and recognition swirling within her. She had dared to confront the very embodiment of fear, and in that moment, she had not just transformed an opportunity, but reclaimed her narrative. "This is our first step to rebirth," she proclaimed, feeling buoyed by the collective anticipation of a shared commitment. "Our journey begins now. Let's build something extraordinary, not just for us, but for those who will succeed us." As they set forth into uncharted territory, Grace reflected on her own evolution. The fear that had once bound her now stripped away, revealing an empowered leader ready to embrace the challenges ahead. She had discovered her voice, her strength. This was more than a professional breakthrough, it was a personal achievement marking the evolution of a woman who had once only seen floors to clean and walls to tend. Grace stepped forward into the light of a new dawn, not just a maid, but an advocate for change, ready to sculpt the future of their shared endeavors. Together, they moved toward transformation, armed with integrity and guided by a newfound commitment to authenticity. Now more than ever, she was resolute, a living testament to the incredible journey of overcoming. What awaited them was not just an unfolding chapter of their company history. It was a part of her own legacy as well. And with her heart aligned in purpose and truth, she knew this was just the beginning. Reach out, embrace your inner courage, and stand with those ready to fight for authenticity and truth within their world. You need to subscribe now to witness more transformative stories that inspire. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to boost the algorithm and keep these stories thriving. Comment your reactions and theories about this dynamic conclusion, and share instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative journey unfold. Don't wait even one more second to spread the message of empowerment.